And boom, we are live. What's up, everybody? Couple Casuals Podcast, episode number 46. I'm your host, Stefano. And guys, my guest today is me, myself, and I. I really wanted to do this episode for a while now to sit down with you guys in effort to build a little bit of a relationship between me and the viewer. We're almost 50 episodes in, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, I haven't really had a chance to sit down with you guys and just discuss a little bit of context to how this podcast came about, how we got here, what sort of things I learned along the way. So that's really going to be the motif of this conversation, is unpacking what I learned from podcasting and what podcasting taught me. Because I'll be honest with you, it gave me a lot of things in life. And for anybody who's been watching and listening, you may have seen some of that. Obviously, built a relationship off of it and many other things. So throughout this episode, I'll kind of go deep into how the podcast came about, how I put it together, and then mainly what it taught me. But what I want everybody to sort of take from it is not necessarily if you are trying to be a podcaster or if you are thinking about getting into podcasting. It's not anything in regards to podcasting specifically. But what I want people to sort of take in, and this is because I reflected on this, and I'm like, I want to have a solo episode. I want to talk to everybody on a one-to-one basis, let everybody get to know who the host is, Stefano. And what I want people to sort of take away from it is basically this. If you're thinking about doing something or wanting to try something, what you can learn from it and what it can give to you is more than you can actually fathom at this present moment. And that's what I'm sort of going to lay out for you today, because I feel that if I didn't start podcasting, then a lot of things in my self-development journey, which to me is of the highest value, would have never came true, would have never happened. I would have never garnered these lessons along the way. So today we're going to unpack all these things. And I'm sort of going to start with, maybe 4 pillars. I'm going to start with 4 pillars of things that I think I learned and I improved on in result to podcasting. And obviously the first one being very transparent, I became a better communicator. And one of the things I learned throughout my years of trying to put myself together and really figure out who Stefano is the power of speech, the power of using your voice. These things are very important. And so when I leaned into podcasting and I started podcasting, I already was working so much on my dialogue and my speech because I understood the significance around of your speech and your dialogue. But when I started podcasting, you put yourself in these situations where you're having to conduct these interviews and hopefully have a good conversation for the viewer and listener to be able to hear and take good insight from. But throughout that stress of conducting those conversations and talking with a variety of different people, it's really contributed to my ability to communicate. And for that, I'm forever grateful. So I'll unpack that even in further detail as we go on. Another thing is I've built tremendous relationships. As I said earlier, I obviously garnered an intimate relationship, something that I strive for a long time, and had a little bit of personal demons to deal with too, which I'm gonna unpack as well. But not only did I garner an intimate relationship in result of podcasting, but the relationships and the lessons that I've learned from people just by having conversations has been something that is of high value to me. And I look back at it, and it's one of the components on what I wanted to discuss with you guys today, because I'm like, what's useful for me to talk to everybody about, especially coming out as the first solo episode with everybody. I wanted to talk about what podcasting taught me, but what I also wanted to highlight is the importance of relationships and what people can contribute to your lives. And that's what I feel like I learned significantly throughout having conversations with people, is people's stories and people's ups and downs or mistakes or your own mistakes that you exchange with people. You really learn a lot from those things. So that's another big component. And maybe one of the most important is what I learned about myself. You put yourself in stressful situations. You put yourself in creative pursuits in this instant. You're going to learn some fucking things about yourself. I'll tell you that for free. You really are. You're going to learn how you operate under stress. You're going to learn how to conduct things properly, how to be organized. And then even a step further, growing up, I've never been really an entrepreneurial type of individual. I've always kind of operated in the sense of fun and just creating and just enjoying what it is that I'm doing. But working with some other people in podcasting and then rubbing shoulders with some individuals who are crushing it in this game already in Toronto, I've been able to take some good lessons on the entrepreneurial aspect of things. And that's been a great lesson to me because that's something I've lacked for a tremendous amount of time. That's another thing that's been very helpful for me. And then the last pillar I'd say is I challenged myself. And that kind of pairs well with the previous point of me learning more about myself. Because when you challenge yourself and you put yourselves in areas of stress, I got to be honest with you, it can be very stressful, especially for me because I tend to be a little bit more of a neurotic individual. So things tend to generate me anxiety, but I don't let that anxiety stop me from doing things. So when I'm having these conversations, when I'm conducting these interviews, when I'm outsourcing, who am I going to talk to next? It puts me in a challenging frame of mind. I'm challenging myself. And that was sort of the bigger picture on why I wanted to start podcasting, but I'm going to get into that in more detail now. So those are sort of the 4 pillars that I'll sort of start off with you guys. But there's one thing I want to note, and this is going to be the big motif of this conversation. The main thing that I want people listening to take from is any pursuit that is going to give you value is worth pursuing. So I'm going to say that again. Any pursuit that is going to give you value is worth pursuing. Sometimes we think, oh, I need to start this business, or I need to do this creative thing, or I need to try this sport, or try this new class, or do whatever it may be. But it needs to make me money. Like sometimes we might operate in that sense. Like if it's not making you money, then it's not worth your while because maybe you're spending money. But as any entrepreneur knows, or any successful person, that maybe is not going to happen right away. But my motivation was the value that I was going to get from podcasting, the improvement that I was going to get within myself from podcasting. And that's kind of where the background meets how it started. So I'm going to explain to you guys how it started. First things first, like any great thing, it started from a conversation. I got to give a big shout out to my cousin Selena. It's something was thinking about for so long. And then there was one Christmas dinner where we were we were eating with the family. You can imagine Italian Christmas dinner, a lot of food on the table, a lot of bread, a lot of carbs. But we were eating good, we were living good. And we came onto the conversation of podcasting and creating. And I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of things, but that conversation with her came at the perfect time to then add water to a seed that was already planted. So then from there, it started to grow. We had some more conversations, and she was sort of that beacon of inspiration and finalization for me to lean into what it is that I've been yearning for. Not necessarily podcasting specifically, but at that particular time, yes, but even in a grander scheme of things, it was creating. And then that translated into podcasting, which I'll get into great detail. So we had this conversation and it began. That's where the whole birth of the podcast really started. But to give you guys even a little bit more contextual value prior to that, growing up, I've always been interested in creating. I've always been interested in expressing myself creatively. My dad would be running around in our basement when family events are happening, and I'd try to jump in front of the camera. I always took great pleasure in watching videos back. I think there was one moment actually too, and I think about this. It's funny how like in your childhood, you'll remember like one moment where it might have planted a seed or a pivotal moment to that grew into something bigger on why you like certain things. But I was part of a bridal party at a young age. And you know those same day edits? Those things are hilarious. Like this one might have been like when they first started coming out, but I was a part of a bridal party. And during the day, they were filming. And then that night when we were at the hall, they played the film back for everybody to see. And I saw that firsthand. And I remember being so amazed by that. I was like, oh my God, look at this. This was from the day. He put it in slow motion. There were some effects. So I took great appreciation for the creating aspect of these of videos and just the whole editing aspect. Like I took a big liking to it, and it was something that was always a part of me because as I would grow up, I in like high school and then even after high school, I started creating videos with my friends. We would be going to parties and stuff. I called it 92 Crew. That's the year we were born. We made videos and I'd edit them, and I got really good at editing and everything like that. But then I had to put a halt to that because, like anybody, growing up, we lean into occupations or careers that were maybe somewhat expected to pursue or go down, or maybe even you think that you're supposed to go down. So mine was policing. I always had a great appreciation and respect for police officers. And it's hilarious now because through podcasting, I've been able to meet some tremendous police officers and build a relationship with them and hear their stories and behind the scenes and see how these guys are. And we're cut from the same cloth. So that appreciation was correct. And it directed me towards a career in policing. So when it came to creating and putting myself out there, or even having dialogue on a podcast that may be contentious, policing and that at the same time aren't exactly hand in hand. It's not something that you can do safely. There's a certain reputation and way you gotta carry yourself online when it comes to policing, and I have respect for that. So fair enough. So I had to hinder that creative expression of myself because I was pursuing this career that maybe it was more for other people, or at one particular time I thought it was for me. But it came to a point where I realized I need to make a choice. I don't know if I can continue pursuing something that I'm not exactly 100% committed to or interested in at this particular moment. Maybe there's other things I'm leaning into, and I didn't know what that was because I didn't have a second to really look into that because I'm doing something else that I think is supposed to be it, but it wasn't at that particular time. Now, who's to say you don't know what happened years down, what can happen years down the road? But at that particular time, now it wasn't it. So went down that road, and you had to make a choice, and kind of where that choice happened was during COVID, and this is where I'm going to explain a little bit more detail now as I drink my water. So COVID hit, and you know the song and dance. The Liberals had us locked down. Didn't have much places to go work out. We didn't have much places to do much, and it gave people the opportunity to really look within. There's a lot of success stories following COVID. We know that, and there's a lot of downfall stories following COVID. So once I was put in that situation, I was running a lot. I was really forcing myself to really look within and understand how I operate and what it is that I want to do. Which direction do I want to go? The self-development journey before that is immense, which I'm going to explain very shortly. But in that particular time, I realized I needed to exit that current career choice that I was pursuing. Even though I had a tremendous amount of respect for police officers and that career in general, at this particular time, it wasn't fit for me. I knew it was time for me to lean into something else, especially following that conversation I had with my cousin. So I had a conversation with the people I need to have a conversation with, and then I started to lean into it. And so during COVID, I made that decision that it was time for me to start the podcast. And for anybody listening, it doesn't have to be podcast for you. It could be anything. But what I did was I learned everything that I needed to learn about creating a podcast, how to edit podcasts, how to sync up the audio to the video, which cameras to use. Some cameras stop at 30 minutes. Some cameras go to 1 hour. There's so many intricate details that go into creating a podcast that, some people say you just got to start now. You just got to start now. I didn't do that. I knew that I was going to start, but I needed time to learn how to do all these things. So I spent 8 weeks learning how to do everything, and before I finally launched my podcast. But the story gets a little bit deeper here. So podcasting was really the elevation of my self-development. And throughout my self-development, I put myself together in many different ways, spiritually, mentally, physically, intellectually. And I really spent time understanding my values and who I was. But when it came to the point of the podcasting, it was sort of the elevation to the next step. And I still had two outstanding things that I feel like I couldn't really grapple with properly, that I couldn't really understand how to do. And one of them was I needed to learn how to open my mind. And the other one was I needed to learn how to open my heart. Those were two things, my mind and my heart, that I had problems with. Now, starting with the mind, that in more great detail is more of the aspect of caring what people think. That was a big one, right? I know a lot of people can relate to that. Grappling with my ego, saying yes to more things. These are things that I had complications with. And what podcasting did is it opened that door a little bit, because I was forced to now grapple with the idea of, okay, I have an innate desire to express myself creatively, and it's now translated into podcasting. I want to do that. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to put myself out there and be subject to criticism, exactly how I'm doing right now. So I had to make a choice. And it was at the perfect time that I needed to make that choice and lean into it and go for it. And that's exactly what I did. Now, was it an overnight process? No, it's still ongoing right now, just like anything that we pursue. So I did that, and throughout each episode, a little bit less nervous, a little bit less care and worry about what people think. It took time, and it still takes time, but podcasting was that cherry on top of that self-development. I spent 8 years almost of really understanding myself and trying to learn about myself, like I mentioned, mentally, spiritually, physically. Now, even to just break those things down further, like mentally, understanding how I tick, understanding my personality. I tend to be a little bit more neurotic in situations. So how do I navigate those things properly so it's not counterproductive to my everyday life? Spiritually, where do I want to lean into when it comes to my faith and my relationship with God? It's always been a part of me, but how do I elevate that experience? How do I build that relationship and understand the value that it brings to me? And physically is one of the things that's always been important to me as a young athlete and growing up into the person I am. This is something I'll be doing for life. Training is for life. And how did I develop that? Running was a big part when it pairs with the self-development. Running and my mind, they work together well, and that's where a lot of my ideas came from and my courage to lean into podcasting specifically. So why podcasting? I think podcasting was the transcending experience from my creative innate desires and my yearning to continue to develop myself on a level that maybe at one point I didn't know if I could really do. But to look back on the journey and see how everything connected, I take great pride in that. And podcasting taught me these things. It taught me a lot about myself. One of the other things that I really want to highlight is values and understanding your values. Throughout my self-development journey, I had to spend time with myself knowing what it is that I value, because when you understand what you value, what means the most to you, whether it's family, your time outside of work, your relationships, your family that you wanna develop and create one day, your social connections, your personal goals, your non-negotiables, these things are important to you. You have to understand those things, especially before you find somebody else to add to your life. So I needed to understand these things, and I spent a lot of time doing that. And then it led up to the podcasting, where I felt, okay, I feel like I know myself. Now I'm ready to know somebody else. And through like a series of events, I had avoidance and issues with allowing somebody in intimately on a like a spiritual, intimate relationship, loving kind of way. Now that can stem from many different things, from heartbreak and from struggles and from my own personal demons that you may have, but that's something that was on me that I had to figure out. So I went through a series of experiences with people, and I wasn't able to let anybody in, and there was just this gap, this block that I had. And little did I know that podcasting would not only be the key to me opening my mind, but would actually be the key to me opening my heart too, which is crazy. And I know it may sound cliche, but this is the greatest value that pursuing something can give you. Has podcasting made me a tremendous amount of money at this point? Of course not. Not yet. That's something that you hope for one day. But my pursuit and my desire was to grow as an individual through challenging myself, through putting myself out there, through expressing myself creatively, which my little Stefano inside of me wants to do. And through that, I was able to open my mind and I was able to open my heart. So as many of you know, which I proposed on this exact podcast, which is amazing when you really think about it and you put these components together. I was working with the It's Simple podcast. We had an episode with my buddy Sergio. Shout out to Sergio. And we were talking about intimacy and love. And I think this was the exact episode that my fiance, soon-to-be wife, Rebecca, saw. And she was in that same realm of work and decided to reach out and have a conversation with me. So because I opened my mind and I said, I'm saying yes to everything from now on, I made that commitment to myself. Anybody that, wants to talk with me and has a certain value, like I'm interested, let's do it. So we met up and we had a discussion, and little did I know that would lead to what has led to today, which many of you may know the story already. But the timing of that was the interesting thing, because if it was 6 to 7 months earlier, my heart may have not been opened yet. But it was at the time now where the door was already creaked open. And she was the exact key to that door to open it even further, because she brought everything that my soul needed to be able to open properly as it did. The patience, the love, the kindness, the gentleness, the understanding to finish opening that door that I worked so hard on making sure stayed closed. So we had a conversation. We shared a lot of our same values on personal development and stuff. And then it ultimately led to a long-term relationship, a healthy relationship, and now a soon-to-be marriage. Or by the time this video comes out, I think probably will already be married. So big salute to that. But really what I want to highlight today, guys, is the best lessons are the ones you learn about yourself. Podcasting and people have taught me more about myself in the past 3 years than I could have ever anticipated. I started this podcast in 2021, and I finished unlocking and working on 2 main things that I needed to finish working on. And now we're at the stage where I'm still enjoying it, and the value that I am garnering from conversations with people, from putting myself out there, from continuing to prepare these conversations, to have these conversations, to outsource the different individuals that I can discuss. These things are of high value, and it's really helped me tremendously. So I want to thank you guys. I want to thank God. I want to thank everybody that's contributed to the journey. And what I want everybody to take away is really to understand that if I didn't lean in and make that choice to start podcasting, did I become a millionaire after it? No. But what I learned is of more value. And what it has opened is of more value. And the journey is just beginning. So I hope that this conversation can provide insight and inspiration or courage for anybody, if you're listening or you're considering trying that thing that you've been fucking bothering yourself about, or finding a way to hinder or block or put away. I hope you can lean into it and try it. Because life is of many components. And I'll kind of wrap it up with this, but what I learned was throughout my self-development journey is there's many components to life. At one point I was pursuing a certain career, and then I moved into another career, which is what I do for work on more of an operational sides of things. And I keep that separate to the podcast, but that was my foundation. That is my foundation. And then there's your time outside of work. But there's more than that too. There's your fitness goals, your personal goals, your relationships, your family, your created family that you're going to start, or that you have, or that you're going to start soon. Many different components to life. So I wanted to find a way, and this is what I learned through a lot of my journey of really finding out what's the best way forward. is how do I put these things together as best as I can and allow time for everything in a healthy manner. So my time outside of work is my creative aspect, is my creative journey that will then hopefully one day supersede and become the main factor and source of income or pursuit in my life. But understanding the many different components that we have to our life. But if you're thinking or you're considering of trying something, don't think of, oh, if I'm going to fail, or, oh, is it going to make me money? That will come. But what is it going to do for you and your soul? And how is it going to help contribute to your identity and to who you are? If it's a positive, then I would strongly recommend that you do try it, because it's a beautiful thing. But overall, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys listening. This has been an interesting a solo episode. I wanted to just unpack in a very condensed form the journey and the understanding of how your host, Stefano, here on Couple Casuals Podcast, is kind of sitting here and what I did to get myself in the courageous frame of mind to be able to do this, and then also let you in a little bit on the vulnerable side of things, on how I operate and the things that I'm trying to do to put myself together to continue to be the best host that I can, and hopefully have the best conversations that I can, and hopefully continue to grow the podcast in a productive manner. And I'm very optimistic that I will. So I'll end you off with the final segment on Couple Casuals Podcast, which is called Salute. Salute is the part of the conversation where I give an opportunity to the guest to end us off with a big salute. So today, I will be ending us off with a salute. And believe it or not, out of all the things that I thought about, I never thought about what I would say here. So I think what I can say off the top of my head, if I had to just wrap it up, and this is the best way to kind of do the salutes, and that's what I love about it when I talk to the people that come on, and they're not really expecting it, right? So it has to be authentic and true, and similar to, maybe that's why I didn't think of it before, because it's more authentic. But I think what's applicable is to be you, but unlock more of you. And the way to do that is to do things that are uncomfortable, whether it be sitting in front of a camera, talking to yourself essentially, or trying something new that may be challenging or challenge your ego or cause you stress and anxiety, because that's exactly where the growth is. So I appreciate you guys. We got some good episodes in the bank. I'm going to continue to do these solo episodes as much as I can to continue to aid the relationship between me and you guys. But I appreciate you guys. Until next time, ciao.